Welcome back. With India having stopped, that is what is the Chinese allegation, that India stopped some Chinese construction, road construction activities. China claims it's its territory. Bhutan says it's Bhutanese territory. Bhutan's issued a demarche to China. And on that, the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra through the Nathula route has been stopped. General Jaswal, is this the first time that India has done something like this, gone across and stopped Chinese road construction? Usually we would hear of Chinese troops coming into Indian territory, perhaps in Ladakh, and stopping road development activities or road construction in our territory.
Well, we have not crossed any time into Chinese territory, but when there is a difference of perception of our boundary, then we also do transgression. Like in Northern Command, if the Chinese do about 250 transgressions, we also do equally about 250 transgressions. Now, this particular area where the road is coming up, I do not know exactly where the road is coming up, though I've been to Dokala myself as a young chap. But that must be one of the areas, probably we'd say that is ours. Well, Bhutanese, they are saying that's theirs. But we never cross over deliberately into any area which is demarcated as Chinese territory.
Okay.
So this is the first time. But I would like to just bring out one strong point over here.
Okay.
Wherever you see Chinese are, they always try and exploit the weakness of another country. And if you succumb to their overtures, you will get overwhelmed. In my case, when the visa was refused to me in Northern Command,
yes,
I think the MEA that time took a very strong step. We cancelled their visits, etc. And ultimately, General Officer Commanding from Northern Command did lead a delegation to China.
Yes.
We just walked midway, otherwise it should have been once again the Northern Army commander. But like I said, with China, diplomacy is the answer.
Okay.
And we have to control the escalatory ladder. There is no such thing as military confrontation with China except for face-offs.
Okay.
So
Ambassador
whatever
Sharma,
is over there, we must
okay,
resolve it
can the current
diplomatically.
situation solve it diplomatically is what you're saying. Ambassador Sharma, can this lead to escalation from this point on, considering that standoff continues perhaps from the 5th of June, as sources say?
You know, we have mechanisms between India and China to deal with the disputes arising at the border and to maintain peace and tranquility at the border. As part of them, yes, there will be, I can say that there will be contacts between India and China. As it is under the BRICS, there is a meeting of national security advisors next month in China. So yes, our national security advisor is going to travel to China. So there will be occasions to discuss these matters. But the real problem is that the pilgrims, for them it is a contingent situation. They have, yes, started, many of them might be old, now they are stranded there. So it's a humanitarian problem. And why link that with this kind of a thing which has been known? There was an incident in Chumar, there was incidents earlier, as General Saab has mentioned. So in the past also we've had these incursions, transgressions, and there have been incidents. But none of them ever warranted this kind of an action, which will put a stop to the kind of normalization and growing relationship which takes to $70 billion of trade between the two countries. So okay, the Chinese linkage is where the problem is, and it has to be handled diplomatically. It has to be handled diplomatically. So the channels of communication between India and China have to be exercised. Now, Chinese trouble is the Chinese spokesman has chosen to come out. It's not Global Times, which we can probably disregard as provocative. Okay. But Chinese spokesmen also have been putting a twist in its statements, yes, which is what is troubling.
It indeed is. And the fact that the army chief is in Sikkim, this of course was a pre-decided visit. The fact that top army commanders, top military commanders are there, is there apprehension, Professor Muni, that there could be some kind of an escalation? And what would that mean? Because the standoff, we are told, continues.
Well, I will carry this argument further in this way, that there is no doubt that we must be cautious and careful in handling the situation, and trust must be on diplomacy. but much would depend upon what the Chinese do. Except this yatra, there is no complete ruling out of the Chinese doing something on the ground which is not acceptable. I'll take you back to the Samdarangchu Valley situation in the late 80s.
Yes.
Now, and not only Samdarang, in Vietnam they did it, in Mongolia they pressurized it. So much would depend upon what the Chinese are going to do about it. And this is where I think militarily one has to be prepared to face the contingency if that arises. But otherwise, I agree with Ambassador Sharma and all other panelists that yes, we should be very careful, very cautious. We have always happened, and look, we have a standing agreement not to violate, not to have fire crossing the borders.
The peace and tranquility agreement.
We have observed it for decades by now. And therefore it is, that's what I am saying. Therefore it is necessary to draw the Chinese attention to these agreements and commitments and ensure that it doesn't escalate.
The Global Times hit out at the growing India-US relationship, saying it's superficial. How is China looking at the relationship, and especially the India-US-Japan Malabar series of exercises next month? US President Donald Trump described them as the biggest ever.
Well, if you are asking me, I would say the Chinese statements have always indicated some very harsh contingencies.
Okay.
And they have even said, they have tried to, in the media, they have tried to remind us of 62.
Yes.
When they said that the US and Soviet Union then supported India and therefore you know the consequences. So if this is the kind of a language, nothing should be ruled out. I know they can use the media cover for sending messages. We should also be prepared in meeting any kind of contingency, despite all the agreements which are standing between us.
General Jaswal, are we prepared to meet any eventualities, given the fact that China's provocations may continue, but militarily on ground? Because look at what the Global Times writes. India needed to be taught rules of handling border disputes. General Jaswal.
This rhetoric continues in China. Let me take you back to 67, when in Nathula we had an incident, and well, the Chinese were sorted out. It's no more 62 scenario, and they said so that if we do not stop it, we will bring in the air. My point is that army today is very well deployed. When I was in 4 Corps, I remember the excise highlighted we wanted additional divisions. And we did get 2 divisions over there. So the troop to ground density has really gone up there. Any misadventure by the Chinese in that area, well, it will be met with a lot of resistance. So Chinese are not going to go in for any physical attack or get into this kind of firing. Yes, intrusions in certain areas may take place if in case they escalate it on the military front. But I think we have got enough checkmates in the diplomatic, the CBMs that we are having, diplomatic spectrum, to lower it down and not get into a military escalation.
Okay.
So I don't think, like in Depsang, they were there for good about, I think, 19-20 days. And let me tell you, on ground, over there in Depsang, there was cordial relation. Of course, it was highlighted, but between the face-off troops, you know, which was there, it was quite cordial. Even over here, yes, they did get on physical. Even in Yangtze area, a couple of 2-3 years back, they went physical. But it was just pushing. To get on to firing, to kinetic responses, I don't think that will take place. China knows that there is no point arm twisting India into a military battle.
Okay. Ambassador Sharma, it has been argued that trade can be used as a weapon. Now, trade from India to China, from China to India, the surplus is so heavily loaded in China's favor that is also something that India can employ as a weapon. Brahma Chilani has argued that.
I think that will be cutting your nose to spite your face. You know, when you have imports, there's reason for that. There are people who get jobs. There are companies who are working. There is production. There is GDP. Now, and this is a trade which has been there since we opened up from the 1991 to now.
Okay.
So these are the basic tenets of globalization, which you import things from all over the world and produce. Now, you can't just measure this saying that, like, if Americans were to stop importing from India, saying that, well, you know, India-American trade is deficit. Imagine what is it like?
Okay.
And then imagine America's deficit with China is even more. It is approaching nearly $1 trillion, but America doesn't stop trade with China.
Yes.
So, you know, this kind of using weapons, this is crazy. Sorry for my language, but you know, I don't believe this kind of jumping to conclusion and using these strong languages.
Okay.
We have to deal with a problem like a stitch in time saves 9. So deal with the stitch and be watchful about expansion or escalation.
Okay.
But not jump to this kind of a situation. I disagree with any suggestion to that account.
Okay, Anant Krishnan, the Global Times goes on to show that India is indulging in unruly provocation. India cannot afford a showdown with China on border issues. India lags behind China in terms of national strength and calls the strategic support from the US superficial. But the fact that the US president talked about India, US, Japan, trilateral Malabar series of exercises, how is China looking at it, Anant?
Well, Gaurav, I think publicly they are keeping a poker face and saying that, well, we are okay with India-US relations as long as they are conducive to the region. But beyond the surface, if you look at what's coming out of the Chinese press as well as several Chinese experts that I have spoken to, there's a lot of attention in terms of the surveillance drones deal in particular, given as they see that as something that could have it could impinge on what China wants to do in the Indian Ocean and give India the capabilities to do more in the Indian Ocean.
Okay. Okay. So, Narendra Taneja, this is something that there's been a situation, there's been a response. What's the government's next step going to be in this situation? There was a road construction, India stopped it, they stopped the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra. What next?
Gaurav, I have listened to you and other panelists very patiently. Now allow me some time. You see, our armed forces are well equipped and they know how they are prepared, ready to deal with any situation, any eventuality on our border with China. That said, we also have to keep in mind, we know what China's ambitions are. China basically wants to ensure that Asia grows into a unipolar region, which means dominated by China, and China is the boss. We will not allow that to happen. We will ensure a multipolar Asia where India will play a big role, Australia, Japan, Korea, Asia and other countries will also play a big role. Number two, China is busy converting the whole of Pakistan, the entire country known as Islamic Republic of Pakistan, into its another state, a kind of Chinese extension of China. That is what is worrisome, and China knows that we are very worried about it. The US is worried about it. Many countries are worried about it. So China is its own worldview. Asia, we have our own, and and the view of China, the worldview of China, the Asian view of China is in conflict with us. And so these situations we will see in years to come now. But at the same time, it's important we let diplomats do our job. Yep. China is a country, it is important for us. India is a country very important for China. So we need to cooperate where we need to cooperate. But at the same time, the message is loud and clear to China. If they try to play any games, we are prepared for it.
And that message perhaps is going across, Professor Muni. I want to come back.
Can I respond to him in 30 seconds?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Muni sahab, मैं आपको थोड़ा सा time ले रहा हूँ. But I want to say this to Taneja sahab. Taneja sahab, literally nothing that you said can be disagreed with. आपकी ये motherhood and apple by statements वाली ऐसी चीज़ है कि हाँ भाई बात तो सही है मगर आपका इरादा क्या है? That is exactly what the purpose of this debate is. Every commentator is trying to lay out a roadmap. Of course we agree China shouldn't be the only unipolar power in the region. Of course we agree that we shouldn't allow them this thing. But what is your plan to deal with them? When you were in the opposition, you were extremely shrill about what you would do if you were in government. You are in government for the last 3 years. Unfortunately, there has been no resolution to this dispute. One of the panelists spoke about the McMahon line. You did not touch upon it. Another panelist spoke about Aksai in 1962. When the issue was at Taneja sahab, I did not interrupt you while you were speaking. Do me the same courtesy. Taneja sahab, do not interrupt me while I am speaking to you, because unfortunately you've said what you've had to say and it was all generalities. What we're asking you as the government is, what is your diplomatic strategy? Gaurav raised a very important point about trade barriers. The WTO, which we are parties to, allows us the right to impose levies on them if they are dumping in our country. The DGFT, a department in the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, is tasked with this responsibility. What are they going to do about it? इसके बारे में बोलिए ना सर, ये बड़ी-बड़ी बातें तो कोई भी कर सकता है, हवाई बातें.
A quick break at this stage, because when I come back, I have to come back to talk about concrete steps. Why is China rattled? Is it just because of the relationship between India, US, Japan, other countries in this region that's firming up? Or is it also because India is opposing China-Pak Economic Corridor and One Belt, One Road initiative? I want to quickly bring in Ambassador Sharma on China's strong statements on the current situation at the Tri-Junction. Ambassador Sharma, is this more about the situation on ground, or is this about the joint exercises that will happen in the Indian Ocean region next month, and also because India has opposed One Belt, One Road? Is that why we see this hostility from China?
I think you should distinguish between Chinese Foreign Office spokesman statements and the Global Times provocations. Global Times, I think we should deal with the contempt that it deserves. Because between two big countries, if any medium or anything which creates problems, it is not good. Looking at the official spokesman statement, I find their statement about India-US joint statement is really very odd. They come out to say that Pakistan's name should not be taken, which is unusual because in previous joint statement between India with President Obama, Pakistan's name was taken. So what is it they are saying? If they are objecting to Pakistan name as a territory for its territory's use for cross-border terrorism, then Musharraf used it in 2002. He said that Pakistan should not be used for terrorist things. So what are they saying? The same Musharraf who, to defend Chinese engineers, incurred the wrath of the Lal Masjid,
Yes.
desperados who were about to kill him. So it is China, are they trying to start the world afresh today as they see it because they become powerful? There is a history to it. So their statement about India-Pakistan or their statement about Indo-US is unauthorized trespass into somebody else's terrain.
Okay.
Just as they say other countries are sovereign, they should not interfere. What about them? So I mean, Chinese actually, I would say that they tend to manage this, part of the Go game. They keep putting blocks and then not only managing relations, but they also have a managed psychosis. They want to create psychosis on the other side by creating these things.
Okay.
And one has to be mature and and clear that what we need to do. We should not falter on what we need to do,
Yes.
but not jump to the conclusions.
And does the initiative then completely rest, Professor Muni, with China? Because China, how would China be looking at the biggest ever naval exercises between India, United States and Japan in the Indian Ocean region?
Gaurav, it is not only a question of the exercises. I think the totality of India-US relation is troublesome for the Chinese. I would recall that even before Mr. Modi landed in Washington, the Chinese had issued a statement that India and the US should not do anything to constrain us in this part of the world.
Yes.
They have always been upset on this question. Secondly, the Chinese are doing a massive push into South Asia for economic and strategic reasons.
Yes.
Pakistan is just an example. And I think more than Pakistan, they are even worried about people like Azhar and Salahuddin, because these people are operating in Pak-occupied Kashmir, where China is physically sitting on its own economic projects and want to ensure that no Islamic influence or terrorism passes through the border into Xinjiang. That's why they are physically there. Therefore, if you and they are probably working with these terrorist organizations and leaders to ensure their own interests. So it goes beyond Pakistan. It is Chinese direct interest which is involved now in Jammu and Kashmir, and therefore in South Asia. They want to come massively into Nepal, into Bangladesh, into Myanmar, into Sri Lanka, into Maldives, into Afghanistan and whatnot.
Yes.
Therefore, you should look at this question in the totality And this is where India has to prepare itself on a long-term basis and very cautiously and very steadily. Not really, I agree with Ambassador Sharma that we need not jump on some of these provocations, but we have to factor them in making a policy. Now I am surprised why we are not strengthening Andaman and Nicobar. The projects which we started there are still going very, very slowly. Now this is where the problem is with India, that unless we prepare ourselves for all kinds of contingencies, suddenly we may land up in a spot where we would have no answers.
Okay, Mr. Taneja, respond to that. Projects that should be speeded up clearly are not being speeded up, especially Andaman Nicobar.
Well, first of all, we are strengthening India's economy, we are strengthening India's armed forces, and we are strengthening India's position vis-a-vis, the rest of the world. Please pay attention to what we have managed to achieve in a short period of just 3 years. And China is very, very upset and actually trying to do its level best in order to disrupt all that we are trying to build across the world. Number two, Andaman Nicobar, first of all, we are doing that. That has been fast-tracked. Number two, at the same time, we are investing Chabahar. We are also investing in our relations with Bangladesh. We are also, working on relations with Sri Lanka. So it's, now China is basically finding its way through Pakistan and other countries into the Indian Ocean, also Arabian Sea, and so on and so forth. So it's not only the Malacca Strait which Mr. Muni is basically referring to. So we are working on that. And what is important at the same time, look at the response of China. They are riddled. They are very, very worried. They are anxious. Why are they worried? Because of the actions that we have delivered over the past 3 months. Mr. Khan, Congress Party spoke. I want to say one thing. You believe in words. We believe in action.
Yes,
you can talk as much as you want. Just see our action and you will have no words left. Wait for some time.
In the beginning of the bulletin, there was bonhomie between the Congress and the BJP. That bonhomie, especially on issues of national security, should remain. It's a very complex situation. I would like to thank all my guests for
Congress compromised on national security.
That bonhomie should remain on national security issues. For the simple reason, it's a very, very dangerous world we live in. It's a very complex world we live in. But we're perhaps seeing a new template on ground. We'll keep reporting on the latest developments on the story.